guys, welcome to another art tutorial, another crafty tutorial with me, Laura, and in today's video I thought I would share with you my process of making these tiny little sketchbooks, and these were so much fun to make and it's not as difficult as you think they will be, and they're brilliant for just putting in your bag and taking it on your travels if you want to do sort of sketching or watercolours, even acrylic painting, which I'm using these for, and they're just really lovely to look at as well. So I'm using for the main cover this really cool paper which I picked up from HobbyCraft, and they sort of come in sort of 12 by 12 inch packs, and some are double-sided, some are single-sided, and they're a little bit thicker than normal paper. I think they're about 180 GSM, so they feel a little bit more like cards, and a little bit textured too as well. And I'm taking my normal mixed media canvas paper, which I use from Rowney, and this is quite good because I'm using the paper for this, and I'm also going to nick the card off the back of the pad. So you might wonder, why would you bother making your own little sketchbooks if you would have a perfectly good sketchbook? And to me, I just feel that they're just much nicer and they're cuter, and they just look a bit nicer than having these sort of office supplies type art materials. So I'm taking the card off the back, which is quite a thick card on these pads, and 3 sheets of this pad. Now this pad is actually A5 size, and it is by Rowney, and it's just mixed media paper, so you can use it for acrylic or watercolour, or even just sketching. So it's just a nice sort of good craft paper. And I'm just going to cut off the top bits at the end to get some nice neat edges. But for the other materials, I'm going to need a ruler, a good Stanley knife, craft knife for cutting, a pencil is useful, and the type of glue that I'm going to be using for this little sketchbook is just a really simple children's PVA glue, and I think in America it's called Elmer's glue, and it just dries really plasticky, so it's really good for this project. You're also going to need a bit of sort of a thinner paper, not really card, it's like sort of almost paper but not paper, in a colour that's going to complement the cover pattern as well. And I'm trying to show here the fact that it is slightly thinner than the cover paper, but it doesn't really matter the thickness of the paper because we're using the card from the pad as well. And also some little clips, I'm using my daughter's clips here. They were just really useful. And so I'm taking all the 3 pieces of paper, and I just want to neaten up that edge where I cut off the sort of the holes at the top. So I'm just making sure it's nice and neat, one side nice and straight, and then just taking off any excess wonky bits, just to make sure the paper is nice and smooth and all the pieces of paper are the same. So just carefully take off any excess. And what we're going to do is we're going to measure the width of these 3 pieces of paper, and measure the whole width across, whether you use centimetres or inches, whatever works for you, and just divide that in half. So, and then we're going to cut that these 3 pieces in half to create some more canvas papers to put in our little pad. So I'm just measuring exactly halfway in between, and one thing I've noticed watching this back and then talking over it again is how particular I am about making things and how perfect they are. But I think that comes to fruition at the end. Really making sure your paper's nice and neat and all the pieces are the same. I think you'll appreciate later on at the end you have a nice neat little notebook. So I'm just dividing these paper in half, and then we're going to cut these carefully, all 3 pieces at once, just to make sure that they are exactly the same, and obviously this saves a bit of time as well. And my Stanley knife has been used quite a lot. I definitely need to get a new one. This has been used for a lot of scratch building. If you follow my channel on Instagram, you'll see some of my scratch build projects, and it's looking a little bit worse for wear. So just cutting these off, and we're pretty much going to do the same process again. So now we've doubled up our canvas paper, so now we should have 6 pieces of paper. And again, we're going to do the same thing again. We're just going to put it horizontally and measure the width again, making sure all those edges are as neatly together as possible, and then just measuring all the way across and then dividing that by 2 again, and then marking that out to create some more canvas paper. So I can't remember the exact measurements for this paper. It doesn't really matter if your paper's different. I think the reason I did it this way is just to try not to waste too much paper, so I just kept dividing in half and dividing in half. But I did want to create a little fairly square shaped book at the end, so I'm just going to cut these pieces in half. Again, you can see how neat I'm being, but it really will be invaluable later when doing the edge, which I'll explain later. So I'm just marking that out, and then I'm going to cut that in half. Again, I'm doing all 6 sheets at the same time, just pushing down gently and then making sure not to try and cut through all 6 pieces in one go. Just do 1 page at a time, just gently. And I did struggle a little bit here with doing all 6 pieces. They just kept sliding around. I think I was just being very particular about it, so I did use one of the clips just to stop them moving around. And eventually we ended up with, I think, so it's going to be about 12 sheets in total for this little pad. I think we ended up with. And then just putting those together on top of each other. But I did, like I said, I wanted to create more of a square shaped pad. I mean, you could have a little portrait pad like this if you wanted to, but I just trimmed off the top so it was a little bit more square, and it ended up being 3 inches by just under 3 inches. And then just do the same with the card off the back of the pad as well. So you want 2 pieces for the front and the back, and it doesn't matter if you end up with a few marks on the card like I did, because we are covering it up with the nice paper. So we're going to take our fancy cover paper, and I've gone for this kind of Scottish stag pattern, which is actually double-sided. The other one I made wasn't double-sided, but this one is, which is quite useful. And then what you want to do is you want to mark out around the cover, but leave about 1 centimetre and a bit beyond the size of the little cardboard front and back cover. So leave a little bit of space, because what we're going to do is we're gonna first of all, we're going to glue taking our PVA glue or Elmer's glue, going to PVA glue the cardboard covers to the paper, deciding which pattern we want to use for the front cover. So I'm just going to glue that on first. And making sure we got it the right way up, because my piece of cardboard is actually slightly taller than it is in width. So what I did is I marked a little arrow just to remind me which way up, which is the thinner edge. So because I didn't want to put it the wrong way around. And then once you've glued that into place, we're going to cut off these little triangles. So if you turn your project diagonally, we're just going to cut off these little triangles off each corner. To do that carefully and go up fairly, not quite up to the cardboard, just leave like sort of 1 millimetre or so. And we're going to repeat that for all the other corners, and obviously for the back cover as well, so that we end up with this kind of sort of hexagon-y sort of shape. And we're going to just gently score, and now we don't want to cut all the way through. I am just very, very lightly running over the paper, and that's because my paper is quite thick, and I want it to bend easily. So there we go, we can bend it over the cardboard, and then just scoring it down and repeating that for all the other sides as well. And that will just create a really nice edge for our front and back covers, so it's not going right up to the edge and it folds over. And obviously it doesn't matter if it's not perfect, the joins, the diagonal joins, we just need to get those folded over, and then we're going to glue those in place. And you want to really get the glue into the crease as well, so it does stick on the edge. I did find this glue really good actually. It's a brilliant craft glue for paper and cardboard and things, so it's quite useful having some good kids glue. As you can see here, it just sticks straight away, and then just repeat that for all the other edges and for the other back cover as well, even though they're identical, it's front and back cover. And then I'm just clipping these into place just to make sure that these glue nice and tight. So I'm just clipping them to my chopping board like so until they're dry. Then once they're dry, what we're going to do is we're going to cut out 2 squares, and we want them to be slightly smaller than the covers, so by just a couple of millimeters or so. And we're going to do that twice for the front and back. It's just to cover it's going to be on the inside, so it's just going to cover that ugly cardboard up. And what's quite good, my paper, like I said, is double-sided, so I thought rather than do the same pattern like I did in my other book, I'm going to actually use the sort of woodland tree pattern and have that on the inside rather than the same pattern. So I quite like how that turned out, just to make it a little bit different. So that was quite useful. I mean, you could use a completely different paper pattern if you wanted to. It's entirely up to you. So I did that for both the front and the back, and then again just glue that into place, and try not to use loads of glue. You don't want your paper, especially if you're using a thinner paper, you don't want it to get wet and wrinkly, so just use not too little, not too much, Goldilocks amount. And then go up almost to the edge, but not quite to the edge when gluing, and then it won't squirt out around the edges. And then carefully just glue that over the top of your remaining cardboard that's showing, and then hopefully press that down. Hopefully they'll look something like this, and repeat that for the other one. So you've got 2, and then when they're nice and dry, we can take our pieces of paper. And hopefully by matching up the arrows that we did, we've got everything facing the right way, because my notebook's slightly taller than it is in width. And this is the moment this is the part where you really need to take your time and make sure all those pieces of paper are right at the back. So I'm just kneading up the edge, but the most important one is this edge here, the one we're going to glue. So we need to make sure that all those pieces of paper are completely flush with the ground, as it were. And I'm just clipping that into place. This video doesn't do it justice. I took a lot more time really making sure that was a completely smooth edge. And obviously the other side, you're going to have lots of different bits of paper sticking out and stuff, but this is the edge you want to be really, really smooth, and just make sure every single piece of paper is flush. You might want to use a ruler to like push the individual pieces down, or a rubber at the end of a rubber, like I did on my pencil. But once you are happy that everything's fairly flush, we're going to glue with the same PVA glue all the ends. And you want to go up to the edge, but you don't want to go around the corner, so it's literally just along that edge, including the covers. We're going to let that dry, and we're going to repeat that 3 times. So you need to let it dry in between, then repeat it 3 times, so you get a nice amount of glue on there. And then once you've done the gluing, which does take a lot longer than this represents, I mean, I actually used a hairdryer to help speed up the process as well. Of the glue drying. The great thing about PVA glue as well is that you can tell when it's dry because it goes clear. So all I'm doing now is I'm taking the thinner piece of paper with a colour that matches the cover, that complements it, and I'm measuring obviously the length of the book and the spine, and just sort of about 1 centimetre into each side. So I think it was about 3 centimetres in total, and then obviously 3 inches, the same length as my little book. And then I'm carefully taking, these clips are actually too small for this project, and they did leave little teeth marks, but checking your 3rd coating of glue is dry. We're going to glue it a 4th time, so you do get a lot of layers of glue on this spine. And again, I'm just going up to the end, I'm not going around the corner, just making sure to get the cover as well each time. So I'm doing exactly the same as I did before. And a nice amount of glue, not too much, so you don't want to soak the paper and make it soggy. and then just carefully taking the piece of paper, and by eye I'm just lining up, making sure that it's roughly a centimetre over each side, making sure it's roughly in the middle, then just pressing down, and then very carefully just folding that over each side. So I completely did this by eye, and luckily it turned out okay. And then just scoring it. Actually, you can see that I can see the paper in the top right corner there. My first attempt was actually slightly too small. It didn't go right up to the edge, so I did actually remake this little rectangle piece of card paper, just to make sure that it did go right up to the edges, so it just didn't look good. When you've done that, we're just going to glue these little flaps over, again making sure to get into that crease, just to make sure we're not missing any parts, and gluing right up to the edge as well. Again, not using loads of glue because you don't want it squirting all out onto your book. And then just gently pressing that in place, quickly wiping off any excess. And repeat that for the other side as well. And we're pretty much there. So once that, I did actually use these clips to just pinch that while it was drying, but you can see there it's left little teeth marks. But once it's completely dry, I'm very careful about opening the book at first. What I do at this stage is, even though it's dry, I check all the pieces of paper are firmly in. I don't really pull, I just gently pull, because obviously if you pull these hard enough they will just come out like they would in a normal glued book. But I'm just making sure that they're all sort of fairly okay in there. They're not going to fall out on me. And then I'm just going to let that dry a little bit longer, not going to break the spine just yet, to paint, and just leave it for say 24 hours or however long you're willing to wait. And there we go, that is the tutorial. Hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.